Welcome to Norse Talk, information of the gods. I am Red Bearded Viking. This is Red Dranger, and tonight, you guys, we are back in the book A Heathen's Guide for the Asatru by Patricia Lafayllve. We're going to be starting chapter 7 tonight, guys. So if you guys are not following us on our Instagrams, please follow our Instagrams and our Discord. Go ahead and jump on our YouTube page to catch up on past episodes. Make sure you're liking our page, commenting on our page, and subscribing to our YouTube page, you guys. And also, for those of you that were here last week, we did announce that the merch store is finally open. So once again, all those links are in our bios, guys. If you want to get Norse Talk merch, the link for that is in the bios under the beacons as well, along with those 3 support groups, you guys. So please help keep this going and send some support out there in one of those pages so that we can keep doing giveaways and everything like that, you guys, and help fund all that stuff for us. So, Red, this was a good chapter. It's a short chapter, but we got a lot to talk about. Do you got anything before we get started here, Red?
Just a quick reminder, guys, that if you do have any questions while we're doing the reading part, we can't really see the questions. We are in the Discord, so please do follow the Discord. And if you have any questions during the show, I am currently in the books Q&A section and can respond to you there. Other than that, no, I think we're ready to go. I'm really excited about this episode and this chapter. I think the book is starting to blend together a lot of the theories and introduce us to some more challenging ones, and I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited about this topic of the chapter because it is an interesting one. Depending on how you take it, there's some different ways to take this chapter, but as always, we take the good side, we take the high side, and we'll show you as we go through this chapter, you guys. Chapter 7, Wyrd and Örlög. I hope I pronounced that right. Me and Red have been trying to figure out how to pronounce that correctly. We've listened to a couple different pronunciations, and we were having trouble understanding what they were saying.
Yeah.
So we're going to go with Örlög just to get through it. So, starting with chapter 7, you guys, Örlög, which translates into your law and is the point at which all things begin. So the year equates to first or primal. And the year law means, so with the year law, it means primal law by which we are all bound. So it's talking about the laws of nature and how we're bound to the laws of nature. So, and then it goes on to talk about the mythology with the Three Norns, which I'll let Red discuss with you guys.
Yeah, this is again getting into the Norns again. We've touched on the Norns a few times, and they do go into more detail in the next chapter, so I'm not going to get too big on them. Just a little brief background: the Norns are the 3 fates. You'll hear them referred to as each one as both titles, and they are in charge of caretaking Yggdrasil. So they reside in the deepest roots part of Yggdrasil near the well, and they nourish and feed Yggdrasil. This is their primary existence. They, when it comes to, again, the Örlög and Yggdrasil, it's really important to remember how. And this I agree and disagree with the author a little bit on this part. It is really important to remember how intertwined the two are, Yggdrasil to the primal law and so on and so forth. We're going to hear some theories as we go on through this chapter that kind of challenge that a little bit in my mind, and I'm rather excited to get further along.
And then it starts going into the Norse creation, you guys, which the myth is opposite of creation from nothingness, compared to the creation from nothingness. This has to do with creation from something already there. And Norse mythology states that first were Niflheim, a land of ice, frost, and frozen things, and Muspelheim, a land of fire magma, um, and with the gap that stood between had the gap that stood between them. And from the union of the fire and ice, the 9 worlds were formed. The gods came quite a while after that, and after the cow licked Ymir clear of the rhymes. He took nourishment from her, and even after the birth of Ysmir, children, the first beings, the entities of Urus, are gods, particularly Odin, Vil, and V, came afterwards and were creator gods. So there was creation before the creation, is basically what it's saying.
Yeah.
And talking about how the gods came after the creation of the 9 worlds.
Yeah. This is a fundamental different way of thinking compared to most monotheists. And it's worth kind of exploring a little bit. When most people think about beginnings or creating, they do think about the one being or the something existing that creates everything else. Right? There's the flash and then the creating from onward. This way is a very different way of looking at it, because while both creator gods created their painting on their canvas, the mono way of looking at it is that creator god also created the canvas, whereas in the Norse mythology that we're talking about here, the canvas is already there to be painted on, and that's a really big difference in theory and practice, and it's something that again ties the gods back to nature, ties them again to a beginning, a middle, and an end, and keeps everything again in that living world cycle that I think is such a fascinating, ongoing, and really well sewn into belief that is touching on a lot of these things that are coming together now.
Right, exactly. So then you guys, after the creation of the gods and everything, it starts talking about the Örlög that came just after the moment of creation. So each of us has his or her individual Örlög, which defines us at the deepest unconscious and physical levels. As we work out the word, the permanent paths of our lives and the paths of our lives change. So the word is like the paths of our lives, where the Örlög is where our life is going. Is basically the aspect of that. So the word is the past, everything that's already happened, and the Örlög is what we're creating as we go.
And so this is where we're going to get into a really this part of the chapter has the potential to become quite a heated debate amongst some people. So as we're going through this part, the book is going to refer to certain things being unchangeable, and I need you guys to try to remember that we're talking about this in a way of a theory, not exactly in the way of physical choice. Choices do happen, and people can change parts of themselves. When we refer to the unchangeable, we're referring to the past, we're referring to the well, we're referring to the primal, the first law. You know what I mean? You are human because you were born from human. You were in that transition. That's what we're going to be talking about in this part. It's not going to be about that people cannot redefine themselves. It's not going to be a part that people can't choose specific things that they believe about themselves or about society. So as we're going through this part, please be patient in jumping to conclusions and try to remember the lens and the view that we are looking at this as, because this can be seen as a very controversial topic, and I don't want it to go down the wrong road for the wrong reason.
Right. So I think I might have said it backwards. The word is the past, or the word is the creation part. The
Yes,
Örlög is the past.
it's the well. It's the
those when I think I flipped those. But so normal or hold on, I lost my place. Hold on 1 second. All right. So normal average people have a hard time living to heroic standards. So it talks about the gods were born and lived, and in time they will die just as we will. It's the natural span of life. So it's that's where we can connect with the gods on the aspect of they live and die just like we do. That's why the gods are so personalized to us, is because there's so many aspects of them that we can compare to ourselves.
Yeah.
So the gods are bound just like we are by the past, the year log, as we are. And so it gives the assumption that everything lives, dies, and so it gives an immortality to the gods as well.
Yeah.
And after that point, so it gives us a little bit of comparison in with the gods and us when it comes to the Wyrd and the Wyrd. But then we start going into um, how we're bound by the two, and how they weave with each other together.
Yeah. See, we're wading into fates versus choice now, and fate in Norse mythology and Norse paganism is a major thing. Um, People, again, I'm saying this generally as a belief amongst the community, that people do have a fate. We are fated. There are certain things in our life that have been cast by the Norns before we enter this realm. And fate and choice get really interesting because if you're fated to do great, you're going to do great. The choices you make in between them don't really matter. You're still going to get there. But that being said, those choices still do have cause and effect on your life. And it gets really, really interesting when you start breaking it down to how that interacts with how you interact with the world, the choices you make that do define you, the consequences of those choices, plus looking back to the first law and thinking, well, you still have a fate, you still have it's already been cast. And that's theory wise, you could spend days on this chapter. And it leads again, Randy was about to get into talking about how that can twist in with
Right, because
how
it
you
talks.
interact with other people.
Yeah, because it talks about how the year log with the year log, we will become what we are destined to become, but our word we can't change, and it includes all beings. The God that we have choices, and ultimately by our year log, we cannot be what we are not. So we're unable to be what we are not already destined to be. But within that boundary, we can act as we wish. We can make
Yeah.
choices, you know, because you may not ever make it to your destiny because of the choices that you made. Your destiny is always striving to be that, but you're not necessarily going to make it there if you don't stay within the realm of making the right choices.
Yeah, and
Because
it's interesting because the fates almost like when you think about fate, you have to think about it as outside of the biological as well. You know what I mean? The choices we make that can affect our lives. But if you're fated, what choices would you have made differently? And that's where you can start really driving yourself nuts if you look back on it, because there are certain choices that you make in life that do define you, and which of those are fated and which of those were natural,
right, but
chaotic randomness.
you always end up at the same fate, no matter which choice you make.
Exactly.
You know,
So when are you playing fate's dice and when are you playing yours? Could it's always an interesting theory. Like, you always have to be looking at every choice you make as being defining, because each one very well could be.
right? And they gave a example in the book here, when they talk about considering the case of the river like the Mississippi, which has a general flow but a large floodplain. and for the most part, the river will stay within its current banks. However, should I lost my place. Okay, however, should a powerful event occur, the river can change its course. It will remain within those boundaries and of its floodplain, but it can and it does shift. So
Yeah.
it'll get smaller and it'll get bigger, but it can't go outside those floodplains, is basically what it's talking about. Because it has those floodplains that are there as an outside boundary, but it always stays within the confinement of that entire
Yeah, it's like thinking about it's like shooting an arrow down like a wind tunnel. You know what I mean? The it's only got one way to go. It's got to make it to the end of the tunnel, but depending on how it's moving, it could move differently down that hallway each time. It can change, but the trajectory is still the same. The end result is still the same. And
Right. Basically, what it's saying is no matter how wide that river gets, if the river is flowing south, it's going to continue to flow south. It's not going to stop flowing south and start flowing north
yeah,
just because the path widened. So the trajectory is going to remain the same no matter what. It's going to keep flowing the same direction. You
exactly.
know,
Yeah,
it's it's not going to change trajectory. It could widen, it could get smaller, but regardless, it's going to stay on that same path of flow.
yeah. So the book for everybody that has read this book, the book does make a reference regarding caterpillars, and if you're a caterpillar, you're a caterpillar, you're a caterpillar. Again, this reference refers as just that. It's a reference. The author chose a physical descriptor reference because it's something that most people are understanding. The theory behind this, I think, exists outside of the biological. So by no way is the author saying that if you are born something, you have to remain that something, because I know that that is a really hot topic issue even inside the community, and I want to make sure that we're not communicating that wrong tonight.
Right.
When we talk about the fates and not being able to change, that exists outside of the biological. That exists in the spiritual, in the soul, in the realms. It's fated. It's your story. What you do with your story in the real is your choice. You're still going to be in that river valley that is your life. Those boundaries are there, and if you breach those boundaries, and something else has happened. But what you do inside there is your choice, and you're not going to be upsetting the fates or spitting in their faces or offending anybody by being who you want to be. And I want to make sure that we're making that really, really clear tonight, because that this chapter can be triggering for some of the community, and I just want to make sure that it's well understood that we're not
Right.
saying
No,
that
and
people
it's,
can't choose what they want to be.
yeah, it's talking in the aspects of our heritage and our family. The direction that the family goes as a unit. It's not talking about the person as much as an individual or any kind of aspect like that. It talks about our past. Our yearlook informs us because it creates us. However, what we do in our lives becomes our worth and matters a great deal in terms of what our lives will eventually become. As we interact with the world around us, with humans, animals, gods, or whatever other entities we find out there, what develops is something resembling a tapestry of ongoing pattern that is our life. Um, I like how the book references it into means of a tapestry because it's basically as every event that you do in your life is being woven in.
Yeah. Well, and
You
it
know,
can't be undone.
exactly. And so creation occurs um, before the god, with creation occurring before the gods and goddesses existed. That means that they too had their own, basically their own tapestry that was woven
Yeah.
by the yearlook and the word, and creating their word as they went along would be each new strand. So the Örlög would be the part of the tapestry that's already there, and then the
Yeah.
word would be the strands as they're woven in.
The experience is woven in. Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's how I read that as well. It was really interesting how the author described the actual physical description of once they are woven in, that part of the weave is complete. Once it is in there, that part is done, and it cannot be removed without destroying part of that tapestry. It's a really great analogy at looking at how the choices you make in your life do define you, even the little ones, even the ones you're not so much thinking about. Once they're made, and there are consequences for them. And you have to own that. It's part of your path now. It's part of your tapestry. It's
Right.
not
So
erasable.
now that we're talking about it in terms of tapestry and how it's being woven as you go, we can get into the aspect of how it's affected by the interaction with other people.
Hmm.
And as the individual patterns get woven, and then you have the interaction with other people, that's where the changes in the patterns come, and that's kind
Yep.
of where the picture that is going to be your life when this tapestry is done. It's those things that you run into that gain a little pixel on there for a change in a little bit of color or whatever to add to it, and that's
Yeah.
how it becomes a picture of what happened in your life. And it's described as a large, infinitely long yet unfinished tapestry. The Yearlug and the Wyrd work together in order to create the pattern itself, but Wyrd is more than just the warp of the loom. It is the finished product as well. We cannot exist on a piece of the interconnect pattern of existence any more than a weaver can pull out a thread already woven into the cloth, because it would leave a hole, and it would where fraying would occur, which would be like a missing part of your life if you try to
Yeah.
remove it. So it's like once it's there, if you try and remove it, it ruins the whole tapestry.
The the amount of theory that the author has interlaced in these last two pages here is really quite amazing. Um, when she talks about how everybody's paths kind of interject with each other, she made a really good point in what I saw was about talking about there not being any absolutes. The example that the author goes into, she talks about how one individual comes to another with a problem. So they were dealing with a negative. That was their part of their next part of their tapestry. But because of the way this person was able to help, it became a positive note in theirs. And their next interaction with their next person was carrying that energy and so on and so forth. It's like skipping a rock across a lake, and every time it bounces, it affects the whole of the lake, even if it's minutely. Each ripple does have cause and effect on everything else around it. And even the bad was had aspects of good from it. Even the good can have aspects of bad from it. Again, it's all about the balance. It's about that it all does exist at the same time. It's all interwoven into the fates. It's part of the story. It's part of the path, and it's unescapable. And again, the amount of theory that is hidden in these last couple of paragraphs is just awesome.
Right, definitely, because it just goes to show how every interaction changes um, the aspect of what's currently going on.
Yeah,
So it's like, and that's where it's talking about the pattern changing, and for it to become a piece, and so you have the beginning and the end, and we're weaving in the middle as we go to get to that end.
yeah,
So when it talks about like the fate, so like if you have the length already set, so now you got to weave in all the pieces of the length.
exactly.
So no matter what, it ends here.
Yeah,
That's the end. So
yeah,
it's everything that's in between that tapestry that creates. what that tapestry ends up looking like. All the
Yeah,
way.
it creates that work of art. It's
It has a beginning point and an end point. Is basically
yeah,
what they're talking about in this chapter. Is just how it all weaves together and how the fate is the end point is going to be the end point at the end point no matter what. Uh, you're not going to change where the point ends.
yeah,
Now, what you do between the beginning and the end can be pretty much anything you want to accomplish, anything you want to be in life, anything. But regardless, your fate is the day that it's going to end for you.
yeah. And not all fates are. People are fated for different things, and the book does speak about that. And that's something we briefly touched on, but it does need to be touched on. Is that your fate is your fate, and you're not going to change it. If you were fated or sent or asked to do something, that's how it's going to be. That's what they put in your path, right? It's unavoidable. It's your path, and it's going to go to point A from point B, regardless of what you want to do with it. The last really kind of cool analogy that I picked up reading the end of this chapter was actually thinking about what we're doing here right now, and there's always been a lot of topic in the Norse community about why the Norse community does so well when it comes together. And I think this chapter really kind of encompasses that without even trying to talk about it, how we do all have a working knowledge of how we have effect on each other, and we try to act as a community because we know that we're stronger together than we are apart. We want to enrich each other's tapestries. And I mean, you see it happening in the comments every time we come together, and it's a really interesting thing now that we're able to do it on such a global level with just our phones and a few cameras and talking into a microphone while reading a book together. But it is so powerful at the same time, because the knowledge that somebody picks up, or the inspiration, or whatever it is that somebody might actually pick up in one of these lives, can be life changing. I know it was for me. I know it was for Redbeard when we first came together. You never know when it's going to happen or what it's going to end up turning into. There have been a lot of really cool stuff that has happened in this community this way, and it's really exciting to see the theories still hold even modernly like this.
Yeah, and it's like when talking about fates, like we were talking earlier, me and Red, and everything about just the two of us in general. You know, the backgrounds that we come from are backgrounds that parts of our life have backgrounds that are very, very different, but have always interacted together.
Yeah,
And the thing is, I think that's part of the fact that we come from those two opposites that interact a lot together. We have this respect for each other in the aspect of what we've gone through in life, um,
yeah,
because we can see it from both spectrums. Um, us being from two different planes of the same spectrum in the first place, and then for us to meet and end up getting to know each other and ending up becoming friends and then ending up doing this together. There's two guys that couldn't be more different in
mm-hmm.
the aspect of part of their life that for some reason work better together than a lot of people do.
Yeah,
So it's just, and that's where the interweaving comes. Me and Red have interweaved with the same path for many years with never meeting, but
yeah.
at one point, even though our histories throughout our lives have crossed many times in a certain aspect, we finally crossed ourselves.
Yeah. And you never know when it's going to happen. You never know how it's going to happen, and you never know how it's going to change your life. This idealism that we have to be stuck to a specific standard or specific way of doing things based on ideologies that really aren't present in modern heathenry. They're just echoes of old belief systems. Um, is really something that we all need to continue to reflect on, because the way we interact with each other does need to be different than a lot of what we're used to. This community is still growing, and we are seeing hundreds and hundreds of new people flooding into it every day, and it's amazing. But we need to keep working at it. We need to stay positive. We need to stay to those beliefs, and we need to keep doing what we're doing. And it's just amazing that we all get to be a part of that right now. The resurgence of modern heathenry is bigger than a lot of us realize it's going to be, and it's really cool to be a part of it the way we are.
Right. And with this chapter talking about just like the whole creation aspect, you guys, and then the year look and the word of it and how everything weaves together. At the end of this chapter, it talks about placing yourself in the word. And I'm going to read um, this part of it, you guys. And this is something I really want you guys to think about in this part of the reading and try doing. And maybe try doing numerous times throughout your life and holding on to these things and comparing them and see where your path is going. But this is what it says right here, you guys. Placing yourself in the word. This is a common practice which will help you realize your own position in the world. Get out a few pieces of blank paper and a pen or pencil. Sit where you can write and not be disturbed. On the first piece of paper, write down everything that is good about yourself, from the most mundane to the best skill. Anything that you can think of that you feel positive about, write it down. Then turn the paper over and write everything bad about yourself, all the bad habits, the things about you that you dislike, and so on. Compare the front and the back and see which outweighs the other. Then ask yourself, are you being too self critical or too arrogant? Shift things around as best you can until you wind up with roughly even, if possible, sides on both sides. Now, on the second piece of paper, you will do the same thing. This time, however, you are writing down specific actions you have taken. Remember, this is only about you and not anyone else. Write down every positive thing you have ever done on one side and every negative thing on the other. Make no excuses for yourself. You are the only one who will see this. Look at the balance of your actions. It is the balance of the past which determines our present. Avoid self blame or self judgment. The point of the exercise is to understand where you are in the present moment, nothing more or nothing less. The odds are that you are a better person than you may have thought. Writing down your positive actions will help you remember that. If done with honesty and personal strength, the exercise will be emotionally draining, but at the same time will clarify for you, letting you know where you stand right now in the present moment. Remember that at any point you need to, you can do this exercise again to trace where you are. If you choose to keep these papers for yourself, you will also begin to see where you've been. Like when I read that, um, that's something that I decided personally I'm going to try out. And I'm going to do both of these exercises and then I'm going to put them away. And in 6 months from now, I'm going to do the exercise again. And then I'm going to pull the two out and I'm going to look at where I was 6 months ago and where I am 6 months from now and
Yeah.
see what the differences are, like what's changed. Um, if I've taken things away or if I've added things and taken things away, why I've done these things, and be able to see where I was and where I've come. And that's something that I might end up continuing to do throughout my life. I'm at least going to do it now in 6 months from now and see how it works out. But it's something that I find really interesting. And I think it could be a good way to track your progress in life uh, on what kind of person you are compared to who you want to be. or where you are in life compared to where you are. And you can actually see where you come from, where you're going, and where you've been.
Yeah, it's a
So
powerful
I think,
exercise.
yeah, I definitely think it would be a really good exercise to try out.
Yeah,
I think it'd be something really fun and unique, and something to just really get you thinking
yeah,
in aspects about yourself and what you're doing with yourself.
yeah. And some, it's about being, this kind of exercise is always going to be about being honest with yourself, and that's why it starts off the way it is a lot of people, when they first try this exercise, they are going to have a lot more negatives about themselves than they are positive. So when you look at both those sheets, it's automatically going to tell you you got something out of whack here. And then you're going to have to start working at finding what are the actual positives and some of those negatives to balance that sheet out. That's going to center you. That's going to lead you into the next part of the exercise. So be honest with yourself and look for the good in the things you do, because even in a mistake, there is knowledge. Even when you fall flat on your face or do something stupid, you take something back from it. Or you may have interacted with somebody else that did. Look to that. Look to the actual cause and effect. Not just on feeling like you didn't do good enough, or you didn't do it this way enough or that way enough. Look at the reality of it, because I can guarantee that every single one of the people in here, and I know that there was a lot, and I can't see the comments right now, but I know that there's a lot of you in there that probably most likely said I'd have a lot more negatives than I did pluses. And a lot of us feel that way all the time, and that's why you have to do the exercise the way you have to do it, because it is going to make you think about all of those things and see the truth for it. Some things aren't great. We're all going to have a balanced list. Remember that. There is no clear, defined one way. There is good in evil. There is evil in good. They exist in balance. They are a part of the living world. They cannot exist without each other. So to you to be effectively present in the world means that you yourself have to be able to face that. And sometimes that's not a lot of fun. But
Right,
that's
and
why
I
you
think
find the balance on the other end.
right because I think a lot of people find they're far more critical on themselves than they actually focus on any of the good stuff that they did, and it's a just about finding that equal balance. You want to be critical on yourself, but you want to see the good in yourself as well. You want to keep those two things about even, so that
Mm-hmm.
you're not looking at a list of critical things as way up here, where your list of good things is down here. You want
Mm-hmm.
these two to cut these two lists or add to the other one or whatever you need to do till they meet,
Yes.
so that you have that healthy balance of good and bad in your life, where you're not being arrogant but you're not being overcritical,
Mm-hmm.
and that'll help you in the aspect of just centering your life, relieving some anxiety, relieving some depression, relieving some stress. Um,
Yeah.
by far is it not a means for a cure for any of those things, but as a person that comes through from all those aspects, along with PTSD and everything else, when you really sit down and you look at everything and you analyze what you wrote down and look at how you're actually being on yourself, it
Yeah.
can help alleviate some of those things a little bit.
It's a it's a it's a beautifully designed exercise for the way it's laid out. The first part of the exercise is going to force you to look at another side of yourself, whether it's looking at some of the bad that you've done or looking for some of the good that you're not recognizing that you're doing. That's going to help ground you. That's going to center you, and it's going to temporarily remove you from your own personal bias to a certain amount. Where then when you go into writing out your actions, and this is the really important part, when you start reading those actions, you're going to be able to look from that with the same kind of keen eye that you were when you were looking at the good and the bad. And you'll be able to look at those actions and the patterns in there in a way that you might not have if you were just thinking about things you've done. It's
Right.
it's very specific, and it's written out this way for a reason, and it's an exercise that you can do several times. Um, it's not necessarily going to be an easy one for everybody, but it doesn't need to be. Just be honest with yourself. Don't get to the end of the first part of that exercise with a full list of bad things and only a half list of good things. If you choose to move on without balancing that part, then you're robbing yourself of the experience of the exercise. Look for the good in the things you do, because it is there. And I know I'm harping on this because I know there's a lot of people, and I'm the same way, that does not see a lot of good in what they do sometimes. So take a
Right.
minute,
And
take it slow.
the biggest thing to remember, you guys, is this is for you personally. This isn't something to show other people or anything like that. This is something to keep to yourself. And remember, it's only for you. So
Yep.
don't look at it in any other aspect than being honest with yourself, because you're
Yep.
not gonna show it to somebody else. You're not worried about what somebody else is gonna think or trying to impress somebody else. You need to be as honest with yourself, critically honest with yourself. I
Yep.
was gonna say as honest as possible, but no, you need to be critically honest with yourself, and you know, push past your barriers that you're not used to or comfortable with crossing.
Yep.
But with that said, you guys, this wraps up the end of chapter 7. Um, on Wednesday, we'll be going into chapter 8, Concepts of Time. And
It's another
so,
interesting one.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting one. It's going to be a fun chapter for us to deal with, you guys. So, for those of you, again, thank you for being here tonight. Check out our YouTube page. Please like our YouTube page, follow it, send us some comments on there, help grow that. Also, you guys, if you're not following us on Instagram or Discord, please follow us over there as well. And again, the merch store is open. All these links are on our bios, on our beacons pages, you guys. So pick them up there. Join us on those different pages. Get your merch and just keep helping this grow, you guys. You got anything else tonight, Red, before we jump to the Q&A?
Nothing to add, no.
All right, guys. Well, as always, you guys, this is a we thing, not a me thing or a him thing. We can't do it without each and every one of you. So you guys stay amazing, stay creative, and always be awesome. And we will see you in a little bit.